So good morning, guys, and thanks for coming. And I'm really happy to offer and give value, and for Christina and the foundation for organizing this fantastic event. And I think it's really great. And so today we're going to talk all about burnout, pushing what it is, pushing through it, managing it, identifying it, and how to succeed in this extremely chaotic and stressful time. So a quick overview, we're going to talk about understanding what it is. We're going to talk about the effects of burnout, the negative effects, and how to properly manage it. We're going to talk about how to identify it, and we're going to talk about coping strategies, both in the immediate, acute, short-term, as well as long-term. And then I'm happy to answer questions, and feel free to ask questions during the talk as well. And so just quickly, briefly about me, I'm a 96 Terry Scholar, A&M, was on the advisory board for the last 3 years. Was really a fantastic experience. I want to thank the foundation for giving me that opportunity. And I chose to go the traditional route. I went to Baylor for medical school, and I did the MD-PhD program. And from an early age, I realized the importance of finances, managing your finances properly, not taking on too much student loan debt. And the Terry Foundation was actually very instrumental in giving me a leg up to succeed in life. And I started reading about investing, started investing early. And during the 2008 market crash, I started strategically investing the income from my clinical side into real estate, and was able to retire early at 38 years old in 2016. I then parlayed that knowledge into coaching physicians how to manage their finances and how to achieve financial independence so that they can successfully navigate career transitions stemming from burnout. So you'll see that burnout has a lot of different components. It could be emotional, it could be financial, could be mental, physical. These things all contribute to burnout. And so my focus was to focus on finances. So if you can fix your finances, that can solve one leg of the equation, and you're able to identify other aspects of things that are causing burnout more effectively. When you talk about identifying and managing burnout, it's two things. One is in the acute term, how do you manage your state, your emotions, your physical, your mental, all of that. And then the second part is actually the proactive part. And that's the one I'm here to talk to you guys about, because that's just things that you can put the proper systems in place, and then you have that proper support. So when stressors and events happen to you during life, you're able to better manage that more effectively. And I talk about different support systems in place. So the first thing is financially, emotionally, socially, physically, and all of these different things. In addition, I run an active media company, and we have an active podcast where we interview entrepreneurs, physicians, people that have been successful navigating through these different things. I try to introduce that into that media arm as well. And so we've got an active podcast with over 10,000 monthly downloads. And we're all active on TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. And I've been a top 10 host on Podmatch since 2021. So it's another arm to help bring this educational aspect to you guys, and to inspire and encourage and educate you guys. So first part is understanding burnout. So we're going to talk about definition, its relevance, causes, and symptoms. So burnout is actually, it's a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress. It's not successfully managed, and you have characterized by feelings of energy depletion. You've got increased mental distance from one's job, family, friends, and reduced professional efficacy. It's important to note that it's not a DSM criteria, which means it's not an official psychiatric diagnosis like depression or anxiety, but it's something that can lead to these types of things. And in this particular talk, we're going to really focus on the occupational context, because that's what we're all here for. Burnout can cause from different sources. It can be from overwhelming workloads, could be from academic stress, perceived lack of control, insufficient rewards for your effort, and lack of a supportive community, lack of fairness, and mismatched values and skills. So all these are different contributors. There's others as well. And so one of the symptoms you have are just feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. And then what that leads to is distancing. So you just basically stop caring about things. You just go through life. You're daydreaming. You're not proactive. You're not doing the things that you're normally doing to stay healthy and succeed. You also can also be plagued by feelings of negativism, especially with doctors. They hate their jobs or they hate their hospitals, but they're tied into there because they've got overwhelming student loan debt and they've got this income and they have to support their wife and kids or their spouses. They've got mortgages, all of that. And then this leads to cynicism and reduced professional efficacy. And so these are the symptoms. And the first thing I want to talk about is between compassion fatigue and burnout. So compassion fatigue is that both involve exhaustion, but the difference is that compassion fatigue is arising from prolonged exposure to other people's traumas, particularly in caregivers, healthcare workers, nursing, social workers, while burnout is a more general state of exhaustion. So it's often caused by chronic work-related stress, and it's regardless of the specific nature. It's like all these stresses and demands are on you, and it's more of a general pervasive. So that's the one thing. And usually compassion fatigue is usually emotional. So you'll have a lot of emotional symptoms, whereas burnout is both physically and mentally. So that's the difference between compassion fatigue and burnout. And before I was a Terry Scholar, I had to take care of my mom who had cancer. I'm very aware of what compassion fatigue is. Second key is, what is the difference between stress versus burnout? And so stress is actually it's a urgency on your nervous system. So it could be in the form of, could be a deadline, could be you need to pay your bills, you need to do something. And these stresses can be either positive or negative. It's how we interpret these stresses. Positive stress can actually move us to achieve more, do great things, whereas prolonged exposure to negative types of stress can make us more prone to burnout. One thing to talk about is when you talk about stress, it can be in the acute or short term, or they can be in the long term and chronic, depending on the duration and intensity. So if you have this acute form of stress and you properly manage it, you've got final exam, or you got an exam really hard, or you got a deadline, that can be actually good. But if it's chronic and it's not properly managed and identified, it leads to burnout. So we're going to talk about identifying those types of triggers and factors and how to manage it. The other thing I want to mention is for compassion fatigue, you'll see that certain personality types are also prone to these types of either stress, compassion fatigue, or burnout. And usually these are like the people-pleasing personality, inability to say no, inability to set boundaries. These types of personalities are actually more prone to burnout and stress and compassion fatigue. So why is this relevant? I think COVID really set the highlight on the importance of mental health. And particularly in the last couple of years, we've had a lot of high-profile celebrities, Simone Biles, talk about and highlight the importance of boundaries and the importance of emotional and mental health. So we'll talk about two types of settings. First is educational setting, which is you guys, and also in the workplace settings, either currently or in the future. So student well-being, particularly in higher education, the world's getting much more chaotic. It's more stressful. There's more demands. When I was applying for undergrad 24 years ago, 25 years ago, UT and M were backup schools. Now it's actually really extremely difficult to get into these schools, and the cost of education is skyrocketing and jobs are not plentiful. Artificial intelligence is coming. All these technologies are disrupting the way we traditionally think how we can survive and make it in this world. So that's first thing. Intense pressure, academic demands. Kids are getting smarter and smarter these days. You guys are superstars. Financial concerns. How are you going to pay for college? Student loan debt. How are you going to go to medical school, law school, business school, all of that? How are you going to finance that? Then on top of that, maybe you take care of aging or sick parents or loved ones, these types of things. So it leads to burnout, and it's characterized by exhaustion, cynicism, and almost like the world and is hopeless. So that's one thing. There's also significant teacher burnout with the educational system, significant demands on teachers, parents expecting teachers to educate their kids, our failing school systems. All of that can lead, a lot of teachers are exiting the system. And this has a significant impact on learning and development. If you have all these pressures, how are you going to be able to focus? How are you going to compete with the smarter kids? All of these things that are, so that's really important to realize the effects of burnout in this type of setting. In the workplace setting, it's a whole different level, because now you're talking about people's salaries, people's pensions, 401ks, healthcare, insurance, all of these things. And so employee health and safety is extremely important. You've seen people that just jump off the deep end, and mass murders, or these types of things are caused by these types of events. Again, productivity and performance. A lot of employees are quitting, leaving, starting their own things. They feel like there's no hope in the corporate world, and it can lead to a toxic workplace culture. Throughout this retreat, you're hearing about team building and how to create more kind of camaraderie. All of these things are really important to create workplace culture. So now that we understand the relevance, let's talk about the actual effects, like what you should be looking for. And we'll divide it into mental, physical, emotional, and social. So mental effects, you can have brain fog. So brain fog is like this area when you're just woken up and just in a daze. Poor sleep, you'll see that poor sleep is both a physical thing and a mental thing. If you're not getting 7 to 8 hours or more, or you're just plagued by feelings of anxiety or worry, you're going to see that you're not going to sleep as well. This affects your mood. It can be anger, depression, could be moodiness, sadness, and it can also, and it impacts your personal identity and self-esteem. A lot of people think, what's wrong with me? Is this the only thing that's happening? But it's happening worldwide. So it's important to realize that you are not the only ones getting affected. It's the whole thing. So it's great that we're shedding light on this issue. If burnout is not properly managed, it can make you more prone to mental disorders, depression, anxiety, and suicide as well. That's happened to a couple of my colleagues where they just feel like it just wasn't worth it anymore. So just be cognizant of that. So physically, we're going to talk about the importance of diet, nutrition, exercise, because if you can gear this up, even with the stressors of life, that'll help you to better manage your mental, emotional, and all these different aspects of your performance. So start with the physical first. It's most important. Again, chronic fatigue, headaches, GI distress, nausea, vomiting, stomach pain, make you more prone to illnesses, colds, flu, and then you're just eventually lethargy, exhaustion, and low energy. So it's really important. And this list is not exhaustive. There's other things as well. Migraines. Moving on to relationships. So it's going to affect you'll see that in the workplace settings, your relationships could be more strained, more irritated, more moody. Your communication could be short-tailed or cut off, these types of things. And then also just your interaction with your colleagues and your supervisors, you could be more short, people losing their temper, people walking out, again, and which creates another strain on your personal relationships outside of work. Could be withdrawal, isolation behaviors with your spouse, loved one, your kids, your family, all of that. So if you notice any of these symptoms happening, you have to distinguish whether it's stress or whether it's burnout. So let's talk about the effects on work, which is really why we're here. So one thing that I really found interesting is that a study conducted by Gallup and its impact on the workforce. And what's really fascinating is I found that 90% of employees are either disengaged or they hate their job, they hate their boss, and they have an active plan to quit. They wish they could be doing something else. So that's startling. What's even more startling is that 23% of employees reported feeling burned out at work almost always. 50% felt feeling burned out sometimes. So around 2/3 of the workforce are experiencing these types of symptoms, which can significantly affect employee engagement, productivity, and health. And you'll hear about employees calling in sick, turnover rates, high turnover rates. So that leads to decreased productivity. Burnout typically leads to physical and emotional exhaustion, reducing employees' ability to perform in their tasks effectively. It's overall, on the bottom line, it negatively affects the company's revenue. Increased absenteeism and turnover. They're more likely to take sick leave, call in sick, come in late, and it's Chronic burnout has been a strong predictor of job turnover. Another startling statistic was that training employees and replacing them, if you have an employee just quit, it's usually cost the company $1 million or more, because you have to hire a new person, you have to interview them and all of that. So it also results in a lower employee morale. The people that are still they're wondering, why are all these people quitting? And it also damages the company's reputation, because if it's a place where people don't want to work, or it's known as a toxic workplace culture, people are not going to go and work for these organizations. And then this leads to also higher health costs. It contributes to a variety of physical and mental health issues, cardiovascular, GI, depression, anxiety, and basically overall driving up higher costs and decreasing the health. So now that we understand the strategies to identify and manage, what I want to do is talk about the acute part, like the short-term strategies and identifying that. And then we're going to move into the long-term strategies. Yeah, so in the short term, it all starts with mindfulness and awareness. So basically, the symptoms that I gave you, and if you feel like yourself tired or stressed out, it all starts there. Then we talked about people pleasing, certain professions that are more prone. And once you recognize the symptoms and understand the causes, and there's a lot of different self-assessment tools, a lot of them are free, to take an inventory to determine whether or not you feel like you're being burned out. One in particular is called the Maslow Burnout Inventory. And what that is, that it's a psychological assessment tools that measures an individual's experience of job burnout. And it examines 3 dimensions of burnout. It's emotional, depersonalization, and personal accomplishment. So each section is a 7-point scale. So if the higher the number that you score, the more likely you are being burned out. And so if you score high on emotional and depersonalization, your risk of burnout is much higher, whereas your personal accomplishment, if that's higher, the risk of your burnout is a lot lower. And it's considered the gold standard for measuring burnout and is used across many different occupations and countries. So you can check that out. It's usually free, and then you can take a self-assessment. Oh, another thing I want to mention is this concept of whether or not you need, for example, to back off, or whether you need to take a break, or whether or not you need to seek professional or counseling or treatment. I'm happy to open that discussion after the talk. So long-term strategies for managing burnout, putting those systems in place to help yourself manage. First thing is setting boundaries. I know as a high achiever, it was really hard to say no to a lot of things. But at some point, especially with corporations and working for companies, you have to communicate with your boss, your coworkers, your colleagues, and be able to set boundaries appropriately and respectfully. Saying no as well, stop people pleasing. And really it comes down to this area, self-care. So really, if you're getting less than 8 hours of sleep a night, that's really you're putting your body into a sleep deficit, and that can make you more prone to burnout and stress. I can't emphasize the importance of diet, nutrition, and exercise. Even though your lives are chaotic and hard, it's really important to really prioritize these things, because as you age, it's really hard to take care of your body. And with all these stress, especially if you're tired, it's really harder to manage the stresses of life. What I love about the Terry Foundation is there's a lot of social activities. So you come together, you're talking about teamwork and group work, and get into meditation, mindfulness. And sometimes I found that nature baths, pets really help as well, spending time with loved ones. The other thing I've really noticed in clients as well is that when they're stressed and they experience these symptoms, they tend to either overindulge in food, drugs, alcohol, these types of things. And so it's important. Sometimes you had a hard day or something, go out to eat, that's fine, but you want to limit that, because if you don't take care of your body and your nutrition, it's going to have adverse effects. Limit alcohol, sugars, fats, and salts. These things are okay in moderation to celebrate, but don't make that kind of like your coping mechanism for the stressors of life. And in the workplace, there's a lot of actively seek mental and emotional support. So it can be through your HR, through your boss, through your colleagues, your coworkers, develop positive, good relationships with them. Outside of that, it could be your friends, your family, your spouse, your loved ones, your friends. Really cultivate a strong emotional network support. So a really good study was that people that had friends and family and people to turn to during hard times did much better than those who isolated, withdrew, and stayed alone and didn't share their struggles. And everybody is struggling as well. Professionally, there's counseling, there's therapy as well. So therapy is with a psychiatrist, with medications and behavioral therapy. And counseling is just somebody like a psychologist, a therapist, to be able to talk things out and discuss things. Within organizations, workload management, support systems, teamwork, all of these things. The last talk really was interesting where they cultivated a strong group within the organization and really focus on those. Conclusion, key takeaways. We talked about burnout, definition and context, symptoms and effects, how to identifying it, short-term and long-term strategies for managing and preventing burnout. And you can get in touch with me at either my email address or my website. These are the links to my social media. Give them a follow, and I'm happy to answer any questions and really open up for discussion.